Welcome to Dream Big with Big Dreamers. Conversations for career growth, inspiration, and insight. It's time to dream big. Hey there, Scott. How you doing?
I am hanging in there. It's weird. Like you, I am snowed in.
Snowed in. It's crazy. You know, talking about it, like snowed in used to be like you'd actually, would stay home, but now everybody is working from home. But, I look at my career and I've almost always worked from home. Did you work from home, Scott, or did you actually go in somewhere?
Yeah, I mean, mostly I've worked from home a lot. I mean, there's been times where I've had offices, but usually it was in the context of religious nonprofits and stuff. So I could work from home. I mean, it wasn't, it was, so normally, yeah, I mean, that has not changed all that much for me.
It hasn't changed a lot for me either, but for a lot of people, this pandemic has really ushered in a state of disruption with, the workplace and where we work. And our guest today is Nelson Squires. Nelson Squires is the EVP and GM for WESCO's global electrical and electronic solutions business. He's been with WESCO for 5 years and joined to lead the Canadian business. He currently resides in Pittsburgh with his family. Now, I don't know if many people, Nelson, know this about you internally at your company, but you started your career the United States Army, and you spent 4 years there. You were an operations officer. You were responsible for planning, training, and deployment for a 720-man infantry battalion. And you were noticed and fast-tracked, and you had accelerated promotions. You were an Army captain, and you earned the Army Commendation Medal. How did that imbue this career that you have today? Because you didn't just end up at WESCO. I mean, you spent 26 years at Air Products. You had a full career there, and then you changed direction, changed everything.
Well, it's a great question. And as I look back, and I've been out of the Army a long time now, but a lot of the fundamentals and the things that you learn stay with you. The first thing is you get an enormous amount of responsibility at a very young age. And that's, frankly, unlike traditional businesses, et cetera. Put in charge of people, millions of dollars of government assets, the safety and well-being of people. And it brings about a level of responsibility and a level of
I almost think it forces you to grow up really fast.
It sure does. And that, I think, was the one thing that I noticed when I got out of the service and joined a company, is I felt, in a good way, 10 years older than the people I was working with, my peers. And it was because of the gravitas of the work and responsibilities that we had. And two things stay with me. One is, good planning never goes out of style. And so in the military, you must plan. It's part of how you operate. We used to laugh and say you don't want to be an hour late for a dawn invasion. So you need to plan properly. You need to make sure your team is ready to go. You need to lead. So the planning is there. And then along with that is probably the discipline. And I don't mean discipline in the crack the rule or on the table, but it's around making sure that you're following good habits all the time. And frankly, I've had to even evaluate that and reevaluate that as a part of this pandemic in terms of how I operate and making sure that I'm taking in time for personal health and wellness and just things that could really get pushed to the side because you're just dealing with so much all the time.
Yeah. A lot of young men and women, as they transition out of the military, there's a lot of them that do struggle. And is it a mindset? Is it that when they're in the military, they're being forced to be disciplined rather than learning the discipline, or was it something else? I mean, how are you able to transition? It seems to me from the outside that you transitioned almost seamlessly. Was there something that you had or did that made it easier for you?
Well, again, it's an interesting question because I've seen the same thing. Just as a civilian looking at people coming out of the military, and I would say it's a couple things. One of them is that there is everything is planned in the military. You know what time everything starts, every time finishes, and so you get used to living that way of life, and and so from that standpoint, there is a transition, regardless of what role you had, regardless of what you did. I think the way it works best, and certainly my company does that now, is we have a very targeted hiring program for veterans. And
that's
so,
fabulous.
so what we're doing then is creating a welcoming environment, and we're trying to maximize those positive skills that they bring, and then help them along with some of the things that they might need to learn. Different group dynamics, different ways of doing things, and frankly, not everything being regimented, 24 hours a day.
Yeah. Well, that's fabulous to hear, because I think more companies need to have that type of a program in place to help, because there is a struggle right now. So hats off to you guys for doing that.
Thank you.
So you went from the Army, you were at Air Products for 26 years. But here's the thing. You were always in a constant state of movement when you were there. I mean, you were promoted like every 2 to 4 years. I think the longest stint was in the very beginning. You were there for about 15 years. But then after that, you were constantly given promotions, and you were moving and taking on more enhanced responsibility. How is it that you didn't stagnate? Like, how is it that what was your philosophy that kept you there, but also kept you in a state of movement?
It's, again, a great question. And the way I would talk about that or answer that is, I first of all, never, I always kept my head down and dove into the deep end of the pool in every role I had. I never wanted to come off as someone that was looking for their next job, let alone their next job, whether it was inside or outside of the company. So for me, it was about really learning quickly and trying to make a difference as soon as possible. And when I joined the company, I looked around the office that I had been assigned to and sized up all of the salespeople, all of my peers that were in there. And frankly, it was very easy, and very quickly I found the one person who was clearly above the rest, the best rep that we had. And I knocked on her door one day and said, "Would you mind if I kind of shadow you for a while? I know I've got this training program going on, but you seem to really know what you're doing, and I listen to you, how you're dealing with customers and et cetera. And it'd be great to shadow you and learn from you." And so I did that with her for the better part of a year. And to this day, that was 32 years ago. She and I are still, friendly and catch up now and then, gone in different directions in our careers, et cetera. I'd call that the first thing that I did. Then beyond that, and I did that with every role, I'd look for people that, you could emulate, good habits and frankly, some bad habits that you just wanted to make sure you avoided out there. The other part of it, too, was then, as much as good companies and most companies have development plans for people, you still have to toot your own horn, or at least get out of your own way occasionally. And so as I looked around the company, I would see roles that I was interested in, and I would start talking to the people in those roles, not in a threatening way, like I'm coming after your job, but more around, how'd you get this job? What's challenging to you? What do you like about it? What you don't like about it? And then try to plant seeds there and in the management team around wanting to do something. An example of this was that the thing that really put me on the map at Air Products was taking over a global relationship for one of our biggest customers. And they did not look at me as an option. I had not been with the company that long. I'd only been around a year and a half. And, This was something that they would typically give to someone with 5 to 10 plus years of experience. And I literally went in and said, I really want this job. I will give it my all. And if I don't work out, fire me. Yeah, just fire me.
Yeah.
And I'll move on, and you guys can reboot and move on. Yeah. Well, I was in the role for 6.5 years. They never did fire me, but it was all about really trying to grab some things. But again, back to the 6.5 years, spending the time in there to do the job right and leave a legacy, build on something. And I truly believe that. I think that's a big part of what I do. So while it's been every 2 to 4 years, it's a head first commitment into every role to make sure I'm doing the best that I can, getting the feedback, using that to get better.
Yeah. Why did you stay at Air Products so long?
I sometimes I still ask myself that question, Scott, but I think, first of all, they did give me a variety of opportunities. They gave me promotional opportunities. I was never wanting for more responsibility. I liked what I was doing. First 15 plus years, I was all in front of customers. And same thing today, customers are where I get my energy from. And so from that standpoint, I traveled the world. I visited 20 or 30 different countries on behalf of Air Products, and really, really loved it. And so that, and as long as they continued to give me opportunities, it was a good, two-way commitment there.
And I mean, Air Products, correct me if I'm wrong, they were put on sort of the Dow Jones Sustainability North America Index as one of the best performing sustainable companies.
Yep.
Which, I mean, you guys dealt with a lot of chemicals and a lot of things.
Absolutely.
That I'm sure that companies like this, there's complex environmental questions. I mean, how did you feel about the environmental legacy of Air Products? Was that something that helped keep you in the game there?
It did, and it's a great point. And I'd say a couple of things. One of them is that when you're in an industry like that and you produce harmful materials or materials that have to be managed very correctly, you have to have good relationships with the communities that you operate in. And so everywhere you see an Air Products facility, I can guarantee you, even though I've been gone 5+ years, that we're good relationship with the fire department, with the police department, with hazardous materials, all that sort of stuff. Because what we would try to do is educate everybody, and take them through what we do and the safeguards that we have around it. If I could share a quick story about this, in Phoenix, Arizona, there's a hotel right across the street from one of our plants. And when the plant was built there was nothing in the within 10 miles. Lo and behold, urban sprawl, crawl. Now there's this big hotel. And so when I would come to the facility to visit the team, I would stay in the hotel. It's right across the street. So I went in one day and checked in, and they didn't know who I was. And I said to the person at the desk, I said, "My goodness, what is going on across the street there? That massive plant, that looks kind of scary." And he looked at me and goes, No, sir, that is," and he explained to me exactly what they did at that plant. And I was thinking to myself, I need to hire this person as a sales rep, first of all. But second, and what it was is that the company went out and basically said, "Hey, I want all of your team members. We'll bring them over. We'll show you what we do. We'll, provide lunch, pay for the time, whatever we need to do. But we want to make sure that people feel safe and secure, that we're a good neighbor." It's that kind of stuff globally that the company really did a phenomenal job at. And as a result, people don't think twice when they see a plant in their backyard with the Air Products logo on the tank.
It's a transparency, I think.
Yes.
That people need, and they see it, and it makes them, certainly feel better. So you were there for this period of time. What lured you away? I mean, what could that person have said to you to make you say, "You know what? Hasta la vista, I'm going somewhere else"? Like, what was that conversation like?
Well, I started there in my 20s and I left in my 50s. I mean, it was that dramatic of a time period, more than half of my life there at the time. And what it came down to really was a couple of things. And one of them was, I think that I felt like I had more runway and more to give and more to offer people that were typically in my role were 5 to 10 years older, and they would typically retire out of a role like that. And I had no interest in retiring. I had, and part of it was personal. I have a younger family. And so at the time, I have two boys. They're 16 and 18 now, but at that point they were 11 and 13. And so I really wanted to work for 10 to 15 more years. And so that kind of drove the decision for me. And so I started looking around and, tried to improve my, profile from an outside perspective, all the things that you never think about updating a resume or a CV. And what intrigued me about the WESCO opportunity was running a good-sized business, and also the international flavor of it was getting outside of the U.S. I'd been in Allentown, Pennsylvania for 17 years and liked it, but it was kind of same old at that point in time. And what this offered me was a completely new landscape, a new country, a new industry, new. And so it appealed to me. And the other good news there is that I really, as I met other people on the management team, I really felt a strong comfort level and a good fit with the organization.
What do you say to a person who is in their 50s and they're looking to make a move? So often I hear age discrimination and, I'm too old, which always makes me laugh at 50. Like, that just seems so young nowadays that, careers can go into their 70s.
Absolutely.
So to me, it just seems they're cutting themselves awfully short. Like, what was it that you got yourself ready, or did you just approach it with a different mindset? Why was this not an impediment to you?
Well, and I give my wife a lot of credit for this, is that, she said, everything you've learned in your career is translatable and transferable. And I've said this to my team members as well, is that, bringing, just because you don't have the depth of knowledge, and I've always said, I'm not going to be at WESCO for 26 years. I doubt it. That I'd be close to 90 at that point in time, or at least 80. So it's really more about the skills and the background you bring. So even drawing back to what I had learned in the Army and, as a field sales rep and managing a global account relationship, managing people, managing investors and investor relations, it all paid off, and there were learnings that I could take with me. I think the other side of that, though, is that you have to get to that stage in your life where you're like, what, I want to do this, and then what do I need to do? And so, frankly, I've certainly working with you, Donna, and building my LinkedIn profile. I've only been on LinkedIn for 2 years now, thanks to you. I was always afraid of it because I knew it was a powerful tool, but I said, I wanted to get in there and make a splash and be as professional as possible. And you, of course, helped me, deliver that, beyond my expectations. But you do have to, you kind of have to figure out, okay, what am I good at? How do I, frankly, sell myself? Yeah. And I mean that in a good way. What are the attributes that you bring? And, and then start leveraging capabilities and networks. I tapped into former CEOs that I had worked with and other senior business leaders to get some connections and just try to start the ball rolling, because, I was kind of starting from a fresh start, literally after, at that point, 24 or 5 years with the company.
What were you like as a kid? Were you one of those friendly, gregarious kids who's always saying hello? And
I kind of was. I was a bit of a class clown, believe it or not. And, and kind of still am to a certain extent. One of the benefits of coming aboard with a new company is I have, 50 years of stories that I wore out on my old company that I have a whole new company to talk about. And most of them are self-deprecating about, funny things that happened on sales calls and things like that. But yeah, I was kind of a good-natured kid. Played baseball, climbed trees, played Army in the backyard, that sort of thing.
What did your parents do for a living?
My mother was a homemaker, and my father was a salesman, and he sold very, different industries. And one of the things that's an interesting dynamic from that standpoint is he was a traveling salesman. And so on Sunday nights or Monday mornings, he got into his car and he disappeared for the week. And, this is what you did in those days. There was no internet and no cell phones. You just made lots and lots of calls. You covered a large territory. He sold office furniture, Hallmark greeting cards, jewelry, and insurance, I believe, are the four main things he sold, not at the same time.
I was going to say, he must have had a huge carpet bag.
But over his lifetime. And so I learned a lot. But what's interesting about that for me is, that he was away a lot. And so the pandemic, as much as it's been tough and, a really tough road to hoe for everyone, I'm home every day. And so sometimes my wife says I'm not around as much as when I was away because we get buried in work. But it's a neat dynamic. And as you said earlier, I think it's, we're getting more personable as a result. Yeah. People are getting to know us a little better. And I think there's positives from that.
Was it tough? I mean, as a leader at WESCO, I'm sure you got in with HR and the other executives and really had to hash this out, for our employees' safety and health. They've got to go home. How are we going to handle this? Was there resistance, or how did you handle that change?
Yeah, I to be honest with you, I was surprised and impressed at how fast we kind of digested the fact that this was a very serious situation and that we needed to come up with alternative work methods, et cetera. We were not a company that everyone had a laptop in their hand and could go home and, as long as you had a wireless, you could be anywhere on the earth. Mm-hmm. We weren't like that. We had to equip 2,500 people to work remotely. And we were able to do that in about 6 weeks. And we did that by repurposing old laptops, buying Chromebooks, doing whatever we could. And I'm very impressed by that. But so that was the easy part, though. The hard part was we're in the fulfillment business. So we've got customers that place orders on the internet, that call and place an order, old-fashioned order taking, et cetera, and we had to get product out the door. So it means we still have to receive product into our warehouses and ship out of those warehouses or branches. And in just North America, over 500 locations that we needed to continue to operate. And so what we did, and other companies have done something very similar, is we put what we call the blue team, white team in place. What that means is we basically looked at the skill set in every location, and we basically said, do we, kind of like Noah's Ark, do we have two of everything? And so when we did, especially in critical roles, we never had those two people in a facility at the same time. And then we would flip every week or every 2 weeks, depending on the location. And then the people that were working in the warehouse or in the branch would go home. The new team would come in. And then if one of them got COVID and we needed to quarantine, we could bring the other team back in. And it was very simple, very novel. And it basically allowed us to continue to run right through this thing, including, knock on wood, today. The other piece of this that we did, though, which I thought was a great idea, was for all of wherever we had major centers. So we have a lot of people here in Pittsburgh. We have a distribution center about 30 minutes from the city. We actually put together a volunteer list that if one of our facilities got knocked out, that we had a list of 30 or 40, in some cases 100 people that were willing to, put on a pair of jeans and some steel toe boots and go into a facility and work. And we did that, had to do that on one or two occasions, but great teamwork, and I really commend the team leadership, our day-to-day, everybody out there, our associates around the world for really doing a good job there and looking out for each other. The biggest challenge that we have had is what people do outside of work. And so, we've even tried to coach people to, keep the Super Bowl parties, to just, the family, trying our best to, persevere through it. But the team did a remarkable job that within 2 weeks, we had completely transformed the way we worked. And then, we asked people to double up till they could, we could get laptops in people's hands and get them connectivity. We had people that did not have wireless access, and we put kits together that they could basically self-install wireless and, work with a provider, that kind of thing. But very unique situation, as we all know. And, I think we come out of it, we're all a little tired, we're all a little stir crazy, but we're better off, I think, because of what we've learned through this.
What do you think will be transferable? I wonder what kind of practices people will retain after the pandemic that we're doing now. Like, are people going to still work from home? Are we going to do, I wonder how many things are going to be, because oftentimes it's only in crisis or disruption.
No question.
That you really look to new practices and ideas. So, what do you think is going to, like in your own sphere, what do you think is going to be carried over in post-pandemic life?
Yeah, Scott, it's another great question. And the one thing that I look at is most things that we've dealt with in the past have been much more short-lived than this. I even think about 9/11, that, 9/11, as terrible as it was, and as much as it hung over our heads, people were back to work. They were on airplanes within 2-3 weeks. It kind of, here we go. I remember being the only person on an airplane about 3 weeks after 9/11. So I think the fact that this has lasted longer will actually burn in some changes. But directly to answer your question, I see two things. The first one is the amount of travel that we felt like we needed to do to just take care of business. Myself, 3 weeks out of every month on the road. Gold cards from 5 different airlines, and and just hundreds, and not thousands, of trips over my lifetime. We don't need to go to all these places as often as we did, and so and my brother-in-law happens to be a pilot, so sorry, but I don't see us getting back on airplanes from a business standpoint to the level that we once did. I think that will, for a long period of time, stay down. The other one is there's no question now that we've all got to embrace hybrid work arrangements. The fact that it works and the fact that we've been able to sustain the business, I think we will come into a world, and I'll use my company as an example. We're not going to invest in offices or bubbles around cubicles, and there were people wanting to come in and put up plyglass and all this other stuff. We're going to rotate people in and out. And I see a scenario where, I'm in the office 3 days a week. We do meetings on those 3 days. The other 2 days working from home. Maybe it flips another week to the exact opposite. But basically trying to we got to get people back together. Yeah. And so when we can do that safely, we've got to do that. We need that camaraderie. We need that human feeling and closeness that everyone, I think, is missing. But I actually see us able to do that. No one's going to look at someone cross-eyed when they say, hey, is it possible for me to work from home? Because that's kind of what used to happen. And unless, frankly, it's a leading-edge, modern, digitized company. The old world industrials, just as I started the session with you all, if your boss walks by at 7:30 or 7:45 in the morning and you're not in your office, that's noted. Yeah. And so that world, I think, is gone away now. And I think, we will actually be more efficient as a result.
Oh, absolutely. And I think it's a long time coming.
Yeah.
I agree. I think we needed this level of, something happening to force it to take place. But I think we're going to see that people, it is so nice, to have a small commute, not to have to get into the car, to be able to do a little bit more at home. I think it really is going to become a blessing.
I think the one thing that we have to watch out for, though, is I've described myself as infinitely schedulable. And so in some cases, my day starts, and many other people, but 6:30, 7 o'clock in the morning goes till 6:30, 7 o'clock at night with 30 minutes free the whole day. And it's too much because you're not going to get work done in many cases in a meeting. So you need to find time. And so I think what we've got to do is compress the hours at which we are willing to be on, say, a Teams or a Zoom call or whatever, and so that we make sure that we free up time to actually do our work.
Yeah. I've been hearing a lot about deep work, and that it's getting harder and harder because there's so much distraction.
And I think, I've read so many articles about people literally feeling burnt out because now all of a sudden they're in meetings 14 hours a day. And so the one nice thing about sitting in your car in traffic was you could listen to the radio if you wanted to listen to a podcast. Full disclosure, I typically slept on every flight I ever flew on. And so, that sometimes worked against me when I tried to go to bed that night. But the seats are so small, I would just sleep on airplanes. So I kind of miss that, to be honest with you. So,
do you have a core philosophy or a key to success that you wish more people knew or realized?
For me, it's pretty simple, and maybe it does go back to the military, and that is in the Boy Scout motto: "Be prepared." And I'm always surprised at that oftentimes there's a lack of preparation. That people come into meetings or sessions or customer visits, and they've not done any planning, they've not done any thinking around it, and I'm a bit maybe on the other side of that pendulum. Is even though I've been around for a while and worked in business for many years, I still spend time every day prepping for the next day. I look at the meetings, I look at my notes, I organize myself so that I can contribute as much as possible or be ready to contribute and I think that's the one area where I wish people would actually invest more time in, because it would make our meetings shorter. It would probably allow us to have fewer meetings, and that's hardly a WESCO comment. I've seen this my entire life, and I think not prepared to the point where you can't be spontaneous, certainly, but on the things that matter, be prepared. And I think if we all did that, we'd actually be more efficient, we'd get more done, and frankly, we'd have more time off.
Isn't that true? Well, Nelson, thank you so much for your time today. You've shared so much, and we've got a lot of takeaways, a lot of things to think about and even to put in place in our own lives. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Well, thank you. It was actually a great pleasure to be with you, and I enjoyed our discussion. So thanks again.